Thank you, President. Well, it's the end of a long week, and this is a very important bill, and the government really couldn't give a toss. It's the end of a long week, and rather than providing a platform,
Order. Thank you. It has been. Yeah, I understand that. That's fabulous. Maybe it wasn't the most parliamentary thing, but we don't all have to yell at each other, please. That's fabulous. You're all here. Thank you. But Ms. Barth, to continue in silence, please.
Acting President, as I rise to speak on the Parks and Public Land Legislation Amendment Bill, Central West and other matters investigation of 2025, I do so with our position. And the Liberals and Nationals will oppose this bill. And this is an omnibus bill. So what the government does, when it wants to put a little bit from column A and column B together and wedge communities, it provides these omnibus bills that it puts at the end of a sitting week rather than giving it its due deference. So what we're going to hear from the other side, across there, both the Labor Party and the Greens as well, we're going to hear about protection. In fact, if I take a running bet on this, we're going to hear everybody from that side talk about we are protecting the land. This land is so precious that we're going to make sure we're going to reclassify it and we're going to protect it. Well, reclassifying state forest to national park is a name on a piece of paper. It does not protect the forest, it doesn't protect the land, it is simply a reclassification. Reclassification does not equal conservation, and we're going to hear that from the other side for the whole of their debate. Now, there are some elements in this bill that we support. There are some very reasonable and actually called for elements in this bill, and now I've called for them on behalf of the Liberals and Nationals in the past. I've called for extended deer hunting in national parks. It's been a platform that we have on behalf of many community members, from law-abiding hunters, law-abiding deer hunters, those people who appreciate and going out into the forest, out into the bush. We support those initiatives, and that is the extension of deer hunting in the Errinundra and the Snowy River National Parks. Now, I could say also there is going to be deer hunting in the 3 new national parks that are going to be created in this bill, which we oppose. But there's already been deer hunting in those state forests as they exist now, so this is not new territory, even though we'll hear that it is. As I've said, we oppose this bill and we will seek to make some substantial amendments to stop that division that exists in this bill. And in doing so, I'll outline our amendments that I'll declare in a little while. There are also some other technical amendments that are either rats and mice or reasonably innocuous. Now, this bill amends various acts. It amends the National Parks Act, it amends the Crown Land and Reserves Act, the Forest Act, the Great Ocean Road and Environment Protection Act. It also makes consequential amendments to the Carlton Recreation Ground Land Act of 1966, the Heritage Rivers Act, the Mineral Resources Act, the St Kilda Land Act, and it repeals the National Parks Amendment Act of 1989. Now, as I've said, so there are some reasonable parts to this and then there are some quite egregious parts to it. What this government will say, and I know the Minister now, Minister Dimopoulos, didn't inherited this legacy or historic commitment that Minister D'Ambrosio, who was the then Environment Minister, has said that there was a VAC, Victorian Environmental Assessment Council, inquiry back in 2019, and that provided a compelling case whereby we need to lock up, we need to shut up these state forests into national parks, and the other side will say protection. What we also know from that inquiry is that many people in the community, in fact 66% of the people that wrote in submissions to the Central West investigation, of 3,000 submissions that were delivered in part of the consultation process, 66% of those said that they oppose the establishment of new national parks, 66%. However, glowingly and overwhelmingly, Minister D'Ambrosio said, we will commit to this. Well, it's taken them quite some time to get there. Indeed, from our perspective, it could take them to the never, never, because this does not need to happen. One of the prospectors and miners, and they're a tremendous group of people, in fact 90,000 registered prospectors and miners out there from diverse backgrounds and right across the state. They at the time, in 2019, and I'm being very transparent about this, they asked and employed Dr Alan Moran, a regulation economics, to do a study on this. And VAC will give you a whole range of things that it did. It said that the reclassification would yield non-use values of $270 million. And that was based on surveys asking respondents what would they hypothetically pay to preserve these forests. This method is known as contingent valuation, and it is widely unreliable and inflated because it's not based on actual market behaviour. And back at the time, VAC said that the land valuation there per hectare in this Central West investigation would be $4,615 per hectare, which was much, much higher than the value of farmland at that time. Now, by contrast, Dr Alan Moran said that the projected net present value loss would be in the magnitude of $2.8 billion and more than 1,000 jobs gone, citing mining, forestry, firewood and recreation. And that flows on to all of those towns and communities around there. So there's been a significant disparity between what a government bureaucracy is saying and what a economic investigator has said. Clearly there is a disparity. Potentially the reality lies in between those two. Now, what we also know, Acting President, is that people have pushed back on this whole national parks agenda. I'll put on record, and I'll speak to this in a moment, but I'll put on record the Liberals and Nationals value national parks. We care about them, we want to see them actively managed, we want to see them better managed, but what this government has done over the decade, I'll tell you what it's done. Analysis of the Victorian Parks annual reports over the past decade, Victoria has expanded its public land estate, its national parks estate, by 20%. While operational funding for Parks Victoria has plummeted by 35%. And even ranger numbers, the government's talking about this new initiative that's coming out, we're going to fund more rangers. Well, it's cut ranger population, those people out in the field with their boots on, doing the work, looking after the land, the forests, pulling out weeds, doing maintenance. They cut these numbers by 28% in the last year. So when we hear the government say, we've got a new initiative, we're going to fund more rangers, well, they've cut them. They've successively cut them over the time. And what we know is Parks Victoria is top-heavy in suits in Melbourne and sincerely insufficient of boots on the ground of rangers. And 73% of Parks Victoria funding, employment funding, costs to pay wages, 73% go to executives and managers. Isn't that the wrong way around? This government has got it upside down. Now let me go back to what I was speaking about in relation to petitions. Between the lower house and this house, I was very proud to support a petition that, until only this week, was the largest petition in the history of this place in e-petitions, over 40,000 signatures of Victorians saying no to new national parks, better manage the ones that we've got. If we add that in from the lower house and the upper house, it's up to 80,000 people have said no to new national parks. And that's what we're saying here. Better manage the ones that you've got. Do not create more. Now, the thing about national parks, and we hear this again from the Minister and again in their media releases, but you can continue to do all the things that you've done in the past. Well, that's just not the case. State parks and national parks differ very sharply in their purpose, in their access and in their management. State forests are under the Forest Act and are managed by DECA, which operate as a multi-use public land, balancing conservation, community access, recreation and local economic activity. In state forests, you can hunt. You can disperse camping. Now, we'll hear from over there, you can camp in the national parks. Well, you can, but you can't take your dog, you can't go off the main track, you can't set a fire safely, you can't light that fire and camp dispersed in a dispersed fashion with your family in a national park. That is a taboo and it's not allowed, and it won't be allowed in these new national parks. You're not allowed to, and I'll get to this very important point in a moment, but you're not allowed to go prospecting and mining. You can in some national parks, but this government has failed to introduce that piece into this legislation. You can't ride your horse unless it's on the main track. I think they'll say that. You can't go off-road four-wheel driving, off-road trail bike riding. Many of the things that so many Victorians do to celebrate the outdoors, experience it, feel better about themselves physically, mentally and emotionally, and spend time with their family. Now, national parks are governed by the National Parks 1975 Act and managed by Parks Victoria and prioritise environmental preservation, apparently, and restrict public use. You can't collect firewood, you can't go off-road, you can't prospect and mine unless you've got the exemption, which this bill doesn't include. You can't go horse riding, you're not allowed to fish unless you're in a designated area, you can't walk your dog, as I've said, you can't use drone extraction and you can't use resource extraction. Now, there are some parts in this bill that are reasonably, I'll say, innocuous. Some of them are about existing land amendments to existing land acts. Princess Park land is made leaseable. Wandong Park is created. Bendigo Park is updated. But get this, in Bendigo Park, this government is about to, in making these national parks, stop firewood, period. Stop firewood, period, unless that park happens to be in the Premier's seat, and then it's going to continue firewood collection up until 2029. And firewood, and as I'm about to allude to, is such an important aspect of heating people's homes. Now, there's an amendment to the Great Ocean Road and Environment Protection Act. There's the Heritage and Mineral Resources Amendments. It's going to expand the Wimmera Heritage Area. It's going to declare a Wandong Park. It is going to make other smaller conservation parks at Cowbar, at Hepburn, at Merbau North, totalling 5,600. The Yellingbo Conservation Area is going to be renamed and expanded into there. It's also going to amend the St Kilda Land Act to allow long-term leases, of which we don't feel is a problem. This is reasonable. And it's going to sunset by 2027. One of the things that this bill certainly does is keep dam licences going, but only for a very short time. As I've said, it extends hunting, and the Nationals and the Liberals very much support recreational hunting. It changes some new gender-neutral language, which of course is now appropriate. He just becomes minister and the like, so these things are all reasonable. Now, I've had a good conversation with my colleague, the member for Polwarth, and I'll be doing certainly some important questions in committee of the whole on this, but the bill introduces amendments to the Gore-Kappa Act, addressing several concerns raised by the Liberals and Nationals when it actually came in 2020. At the time, we opposed the creation of Gorkappa and warning it would duplicate the responsibilities of Parks Victoria and local governments and create confusion over land boundaries. Well, indeed, some of the amendments that we have in this bill now actually tidies up some of our concern. It expands the definition of a scenic landscape area. It provides strategic framework improvements. The land management strategy must prepare a long-term strategy and it must be approved by the Minister and published in the Gazette. It incorporates planning and oversight and annual plans, and the Minister has the power to approve or amend or reject these plans. What some of my concerns, and I do want to flesh this out in Committee of the Whole, will be that from November 1st, Parks Victoria formally transferred the management responsibilities, the assets and the funding of the area to Gorkappa. And we raised those concerns in the bill briefing, and we still didn't get any clarity around that, around how the operational costs will be managed post the transfer. And so I put that on record that it's really important that we delve into that to get some straight answers. Now, the thing about national parks, we will hear it's going to protect. The greatest threat to public land, to forests, is out-of-control bushfires, is pests and weeds. And out-of-control bushfires and pests and weeds do not recognise a reclassified piece of land. And what this government has done over time has really endangered regional Victorians, but not only regional Victorians, it's actually nipping at the heels of suburbia as well. During its time, this government has introduced Safer Together, and if you go out into the regions and talk to people about the Safer Together policy, they throw their hands up in frustration. In fact, I even spoke recently to a fantastic fellow who worked for DECA. He's now retired on to other things, but he was part of the facilitator who sorted out this Safer Together, and he said even it is still hard to manage, hard to define, and it is clearly with this government hard to bring to fruition. Over the last decade, this government has only provided a reduction in burns, and by that I mean fuel reduction and mechanical burns, of 1.5%. Now, this is an indictment because the Bushfire Royal Commission in 2009 said that the appropriate target, the rolling target per annum, should be 5%. In fact, I think they actually were up to 8%, but they brought it down for, we'll say, rationale of actually making it happen, 5%. And what does that mean? It actually protects people if you do cool burns. If you take the fuel load out, you cannot know where lightning's going to strike or, if there's a firebug. You cannot stop the wind blowing and the conditions of being dangerous, but you can, this government can and should manage fuel load. And it hasn't for a decade, and regional Victorians are paying the price. Now, in terms of invasive weeds, go out there, you go and talk to some of these people, walk into our state forests again and national parks, you will see blackberries in vast quantities choking out our naturally beautiful areas, iconic areas, landscapes that all Victorians treasure. You see serrated tussock, other noxious weeds, and you see them competing for and overtaking natural flora. And of course it degrades the habitat, and it also, you get foxes, you get wild dogs. They are wild dogs, not dingoes, there is a difference. Pigs, rabbits, feral cats kill thousands and thousands of birds, native birds, every year. But what happens with these bushfires, and we saw it in 2019, 2020, and we saw it this year in the Grampians area, but they incinerate everything. So unless this government is going to take seriously and turn around its mode, we are going to see, again, more serious impact on life, on property, on stock, and on native flora and fauna. And what have we got now? We've got a government that isn't fire ready, and it won't be fire ready in these new national parks either. We have 350 either G-Wagons or Unimogs off the line. I had a former forester who lives in East Gippsland. He's working hard, and he rang me today and he said, I just have to tell you, Melina, those Unimogs, they overheat when they go out on bush up into the tracks. Their engines overheat and they won't work. So you're putting these people in this vehicle and putting them in front of the fire, bushfires, out of control bushfires. Now, the government's taken them offline, and what's it done? It's borrowing other vehicles from interstate and it's calling on the CFA, can you backfill? Well, it's known about this problem for best part of 8 years. These are dangerous. And what did we have? We also had the Premier talk, and I must just go back to that. The Premier said, hand on her heart, in Bendigo a year and a half ago, said we won't lock. As I want to be clear, as Premier, and I'm a proud Victorian, I won't put a padlock on our public forests. It's not who I am and it's not what I believe in. Well, I've said this before, and we will say it again, the Liberals and Nationals, that this is being cute with the truth, because whilst you're not putting a padlock on a fence around it and a padlock, you are restricting access. And not only that, you're restricting access to traditional owners too. I know at the time when the Wombat Forest had a shocking windstorm and there were a lot of windrow, there were trees falling over, and there was engaged with Vic Forest at the time to take that windrow timber off and use it. And who are the people that caused, threw their hands up and outraged, were the Greens. And I find that the most amazing thing. You've got on one hand protect and facilitate and bring about better outcomes for traditional owners, but if you're doing something that I don't want you to do, like actually take the timber, take it off the ground, make the best use for it, and they've got an amendment coming through to say that no, you can't do that, and we'll wait for them to bring that amendment on. But indeed, it works as long as you suit our ideology. Well, certainly we don't subscribe to that. Now, let me get to the point on firewood, because this is a really significant issue for regional people. One of the most damaging and short-sighted aspects of this bill is its treatment of firewood. This government has stubbornly refused to understand. Once the bill is declared a national park, national reserve or heritage area, firewood collection is permanently banned. As I said, only if you're in the Premier's seat until July 2019, after the next election, you can collect firewood in that Bendigo Regional Park. And so it's saying no to firewood. Thousands of regional families, particularly older residents, low-income householders, communities without access to natural gas, firewood is not a luxury, it is a basic necessity. And once the government shut down the sustainable native timber industry, it also made it excruciatingly difficult for people to access firewood. And my colleague Tim Bull has raised this on many occasions. And so sometimes you're looking at the difference between people actually heating their homes. It's absurdly breathtaking in its ridiculous nature. And it also helps, of course, collection of firewood helps to reduce that fuel load build-up. Acting President, what I would like to do now is just speak to some of our amendments. There are a couple of amendments and I'm happy to circulate them now. Thanks, Acting President.
Yep, if we could get them circulated, thanks.
So, thanks, Acting President. So there's a couple of amendments. One, we will stick to our guns in terms of our opposition to creating 3 new national parks, 65,000 hectares, and that will be to move a reasoned amendment to call on the government to basically withdraw the bill and then redraft it into 2 separate bills. And that is taking into account more stakeholder consultation, and this is the establishment of Mount Bangor, Pyrenees and Wombat-Lerderderg National Parks. We want to make sure that people are able to communicate in terms of traditional recreational activities, invasive species management, fire management and the rural economy, and then retain the other parts of the bill that, as I said, that some we support, deer hunting, and others we are more ambivalent on. The other part that I would like to, the other amendment in relation to this would be, should that fail, and I hope that it doesn't, but should that fail, we will then move amendments subsequently in each of the associated clauses to remove it, to pick the national park out of this bill. So that is the second one that I would seek support on. And the third one is something that I appreciate the fantastic people, the prospectors and miners, helped me to understand. And indeed, I sent a letter off to the department and I thank them for their response. In the Parks 1975 bill, there is a section in there that facilitates the minister to issue mineral search authorities for national parks, and it's consistent in that National Parks bill, in that National Parks Act. Now, what the government hasn't done in this bill is actually include these new national parks and incorporate that particular, it's called a 32D of the National Parks Act, which allows the minister to authorise by notice in the Government Gazette, in which prospecting and recreational fossicking in limited areas in certain schedules of the Act. So it's about saying you actually can do this, you can go out and the minister could then facilitate and enable this to happen. Well, it isn't in this bill at the moment, so right now it doesn't exist, and we would seek to put that in. Still, the power is with the minister, but certainly it's an important one, and we thank the prospecting and mining fraternity, those people that love to get out there, and what we know with so many of the people, four-wheel drivers, etc., they actually leave the bush in a better place than when they started it. They look to improve it. They look to take the rubbish out, and I was talking to somebody from that area as well to say that they actually got sick. They would take all the junk and rubbish and old tins and whatever, because that area out there is also, it's not pristine. It's actually been used. It's been used for forestry over the years. It's been used. It is not pristine Wilson's Promontory forested area. It is great scrub, a great location, there's no doubt about it, but please don't think that it is this sort of pristine forest. But those prospectors and miners, they take that rubbish out. So, in conclusion, Acting President, the Premier said, "I'll never put a padlock on public land." But Labor has systematically, over time, underfunded Parks Victoria and DECA. They've cut rangers and field officers. They've created more suits in Melbourne, pen pushers that aren't supporting our native flora and fauna. This government has also not released a State of the Forest report, the last one was in 2018. That's the report on its own homework. How is it actually looking after all of the important values in the forests, in our national parks and state forests? It's not doing landscape assessments, it's not doing monitoring, and it's not doing reporting. That isn't good enough. The government has stopped fuel reduction burning, drilled it down to a minimum. They've allowed pests and weeds to explode. They've ended the native timber industry. They've removed legal firewood supply in these areas specifically. They've ignored recreational groups, ignored farming groups. They've ignored beekeepers, and they're shutting them out of Wilson's Promontory. They've ignored local councils, they've ignored the science, and they've ignored common sense. The Liberals and Nationals will stand up for regional Victorians. They'll stand up for city people who want to enjoy life and get out there, be with their family and experience the very best. They'll stand up for traditional users, we will, and we'll stand up for common sense. We'll move these amendments, we will oppose the locking up of land provisions, and we will continue to fight for public access to public land and better better management, active management of our public land.
Before you finish, Ms Barth, can you move your reasoned amendment, please?
I move my reasoned amendment.
Thank you. Ms Watt.